The photograph nobody could agree on there is a photograph taken on May 19, 2018, at Windsor Castle, that the world looked at and saw two entirely different things. In it, a woman in a white Givenchy gown stands beside a prince in his military uniform. She is 36 years old, biracial, American, self-made. He is 33, the younger son of the most famous royal family in the world, a man who buried his mother at 12 and has been carrying that grief in public ever since. They are holding hands, she is looking at him. He is looking at her. The crowd of 100,000 people lining the streets of Windsor is delirious. Half the world looked at that photograph and saw a fairy tale, a modern love story. A monarchy finally catching up with the 21st century, a mixed-race woman in white walking into an institution that had once, within living memory, refused to allow its members to marry divorced people, Catholics, or anyone who deviated from a very narrow definition of acceptable. The other half looked at the same photograph and saw the beginning of the end of something, the first crack in a wall that had stood for 1,000 years. They were both right. That is the thing about this story that makes it so difficult to tell and so impossible to stop talking about. There is no version of events in which everyone is simply wrong. There is no clean villain, no simple victim, no explanation that accounts for all the damage. What there is instead is a rupture, one of the most public, most documented, most consequential family ruptures of the 21st century. A rupture that split a monarchy, divided a nation, separated two brothers who had buried their mother together, and sent a prince and his wife to California with two small children who will grow up caught between two worlds. This is not a story about who is right. It is a story about what happens when an immovable institution meets an unstoppable force, and neither gives way. This is the dark truth about Meghan Markle and the Windsors, and what they did to each other. The firm, London, 1,000 years in the making. To understand what Meghan Markle walked into, you have to understand what the British monarchy actually is. Not the pageantry, not the horses and the gold carriages and the men in bearskin hats. The institution itself. What it is built from, what it requires of the people inside it, and what it has historically done to those who fail to comply. The British Crown is not primarily a family. It is a corporation. Those inside it use the word "the firm" without irony. It was reportedly Prince Philip who coined it, and it captures something essential, that the monarchy operates on institutional logic, not personal feeling. Sentiment is managed. Emotion is permitted in carefully controlled doses at carefully controlled moments. Everything else is subordinated to the continuation of the institution. The assets are staggering. The Crown Estate, the portfolio of land and property that belongs to the Crown in a complex constitutional arrangement, was valued at approximately £6 billion as of 2022. The Duchy of Lancaster, which provides the sovereign's private income, generates over £20 million annually. The Duchy of Cornwall, which belongs to the heir to the throne, generates over £20 million annually as well. Sandringham and Balmoral, the private royal estates, are worth hundreds of millions. The art collection, Rembrandts, Vermeers, Van Dycks, spread across the royal residences, is priceless by any conventional measure. The crown jewels are insured for amounts that remain classified. The institution that generates and protects this wealth has done so for over 1,000 years by maintaining one thing above all others: continuity, the appearance of stability, the suggestion that whatever storms break over the rest of the world, the crown endures. To maintain that appearance, the institution has developed systems. Systems for managing the press, systems for managing message, systems for managing the people inside it, which is to say, systems for managing what those people say, do, wear, eat, whom they associate with, what emotions they display and when. The word used inside the palace for this management is support. What it sometimes functions as is control. The institution has broken people before. It broke Princess Margaret, whose request to marry the man she loved was refused on grounds of royal protocol, and who spent the remainder of her life in a spiral of alcohol and disappointment that the palace managed with silence and the occasional carefully worded statement. It very nearly broke Princess Anne, who survived a kidnapping attempt in 1974 and was simply expected to continue. It is widely agreed by people across the political spectrum to have contributed significantly to the destruction of Diana Spencer, who arrived at the palace at 19, asked repeatedly for help. was told repeatedly to manage, and died at 36 in a Paris tunnel, having never quite found a way to breathe inside the walls that surrounded her. This was the institution into which Meghan Markle arrived on May 19, 2018. She arrived at a full run. The girl from Crenshaw, Los Angeles, 1981–2011. Rachel Meghan Markle was born on the 4th of August, 1981, in Los Angeles, California, to Thomas Markle Sr., a television lighting director, and Doria Ragland, a social worker and yoga instructor. Her parents divorced when she was 6 years old. She grew up shuttling between two households, her father's in the San Fernando Valley, her mother's in Crenshaw, and learning, as children of divorce who belong completely to neither household often learn how to read a room, how to become what the room needed, how to move between worlds without losing the thread of herself. She was biracial in a city that had not yet learned to stop making that complicated. Her father was white, her mother was black. She attended the Hollywood Little Red Schoolhouse, then Immaculate Heart High School, a Catholic girls' school in Los Feliz, where she was, by teacher accounts, academically serious, theatrically inclined, and socially confident in a way that impressed people who worked with ambitious teenagers for a living. She has spoken about what it was like to be biracial in Hollywood, the casting calls where she was told she wasn't black enough for one role and not white enough for another, the boxes on forms that didn't have a box for what she was. She has said she was neither. She has said she was both. The particular American loneliness of existing between categories is something she navigated for her entire childhood and the entirety of her professional life before the palace. She attended Northwestern University, where she studied theater and international relations, a pairing that in retrospect seems almost prescient. She graduated in 2003 and did what every young actor in America does. She auditioned, and waited tables in between. She worked as a calligrapher for wedding invitations. She was, for several years, not successful enough to be called successful and not unsuccessful enough to quit. Her first marriage, to film producer Trevor Engelson, lasted from 2011 to 2013. He has never spoken substantially about the divorce. She has spoken about it only in the most general terms. What is documented is that in 2011, the same year she married Engelson, she landed the role that would make her name, Rachel Zane, a paralegal with a secret on the USA Network legal drama Suits. The show ran for 9 seasons. Suits was not prestige television. It did not win awards of the kind that define a career, but it was enormously popular globally, consistently, and Meghan Markle was enormously popular within it. She was paid, at the height of the series, approximately $50,000 per episode. She had a lifestyle blog called The Tig, a following on Instagram that numbered in the hundreds of thousands, a philanthropic profile that included UN women work, and what friends described as a genuine ambition to use whatever platform she had for something meaningful. She was not famous, not really. Not in the way that changes the texture of daily life. She could walk through an airport without a photographer at her heel. She had friends who were not famous, lunches at restaurants that were not surveilled, an Instagram account that showed her real dinner parties and real travel, and a real life that she controlled the curation of entirely. In the summer of 2016, a mutual friend introduced her, on a blind date in London, to Prince Harry. She did not know what she was walking into. This is, depending on whom you ask, either the most important fact about everything that followed or completely irrelevant to it. The Courtship and the Crowd, London, 2016–2018. Harry Wales, as he was known to his friends, was 31 years old when he met Meghan Markle. He was the younger son of the heir to the throne, which meant he was 5th in line for a crown he would almost certainly never wear. He was popular in the way that younger royal children sometimes are freed from the particular weight of direct succession. Permitted to be somewhat more human than the heir is allowed to be admired for his military service in Afghanistan and for his evident grief over his mother's death, which he had managed publicly with a kind of raw honesty that the palace had not always encouraged, but that the public had always responded to. He was also, by his own admission in his memoir and in public interviews, struggling. The grief from his mother's death, which he had suppressed in the way that 12-year-old boys learn to suppress things when the world is watching, had begun surfacing in his late 20s and early 30s. He had sought therapy. He had spoken about mental health in a way that no member of the royal family had ever spoken about it before. He was trying, in the most genuine sense, to become a functioning adult human being while living inside an institution that had very little framework for that project. Their courtship was conducted under a level of scrutiny that is genuinely difficult to convey. The British tabloid press, a system unlike anything that exists in America in its reach, its aggression, and its historical relationship with the palace, became aware of the relationship within weeks. The coverage was, from the beginning, bifurcated in a way that tracked almost exactly along racial lines. Newspapers that covered Meghan's mixed heritage with a warmth bordering on celebration in one column ran headlines in another that referred to her as straight outta Compton and described her family background as exotic. The Daily Mail published a piece about her that referenced her almost straight out of the colony heritage. A columnist described Prince Harry as being led by his lust. Harry did something unprecedented. In November 2016, 6 months into the relationship, the palace issued a formal statement through his communications secretary expressing his personal displeasure at the coverage and explicitly referencing the racial undertones of the tabloid treatment. It was remarkable. Members of the royal family do not issue statements about their personal lives. They do not criticize the press. The press and the palace have maintained, for decades, a mutually useful and mutually destructive symbiosis. The press gets access, the palace gets the narrative management it requires, and the person in the middle, as Diana could attest, is frequently crushed between the two. Harry had broken the rules before he and Meghan were even engaged. They announced their engagement on November 27, 2017. The engagement interview, conducted on the grounds of Kensington Palace, was watched by tens of millions. Meghan was warm, direct, self-possessed. She spoke about her relationship with the royal family with evident enthusiasm. She said she hadn't done much research before meeting Harry, hadn't Googled him extensively, hadn't known the full scope of what she was entering. She said she was looking forward to it. Asked if she understood the pressure of royal life, she said yes. She seemed to mean it. Whether she truly understood it, whether anyone from outside the institution can truly understand it before they are inside it, is the question that the next 4 years would answer. Inside the firm, London, 2018-2019. The wedding on the 19th of May, 2018, was watched by 19 billion people. It was, by any measure, a spectacle of extraordinary beauty and pageantry. The gospel choir singing Stand By Me in St. George's Chapel. The sermon by Bishop Michael Curry, the first black presiding bishop of the U.S. Episcopal Church, who spoke about love in a way that made the assembled British aristocracy visibly uncertain about how to arrange their faces. Meghan's mother Doria Ragland, sitting alone in the front pew in a sage-green suit, her natural hair in a bun, watching her daughter marry a prince. The Duke and Duchess of Sussex, as they were now titled, moved into Frogmore Cottage in Windsor. Staff was assembled, offices were established. The machinery of royal life was engaged, and almost immediately something began to go wrong. What exactly went wrong is the subject of the most furious ongoing dispute in modern British public life. And the honest answer is that both of the dominant narratives, the palace's and Meghan's, are true in the ways that incomplete accounts of complex events are true, and neither fully explains what happened. The palace's version, Meghan Markle was demanding, difficult, and either unable or unwilling to adapt to the requirements of royal life. She made staff cry. She sent emails at 5 a.m. She expected a level of autonomous decision-making about her own engagements, her own wardrobe, her own communications strategy, that the institution could not accommodate. She was used to running her own life and could not surrender that control. She pushed Harry away from his family, his friends, and his institutional obligations. The staff who worked for them were exhausted and distressed. The relationship between Harry and William, always complicated, became impossible. Meghan's version: she arrived at the institution desperate to contribute, prepared to work, willing to conform, and found that the support she had been promised was not forthcoming. Requests for help with the mental health crisis she began experiencing were declined or deflected. The press coverage, which was savage in a way that went beyond anything William's wife Catherine had faced, was not counteracted by the institution, which she felt could and should have defended her. She was not, she and Harry would say explicitly in the opera interview, protected. She was not given the same institutional support that other members of the family received, and the reason, they suggested with varying degrees of explicitness, was race. Both of these accounts are reported by people who were there. Both are corroborated by documentation, emails, testimony, contemporaneous accounts. They are not mutually exclusive. An institution can fail to support someone and that person can also be genuinely difficult to accommodate. These things coexist in complicated situations involving complicated people inside complicated structures. What is undeniable is the outcome. The Opera Moment, March 7, 2021. On the 8th of March, 2020, Harry and Meghan announced that they would be stepping back from senior royal duties. They would not be the first members of the royal family to reduce their public roles. But they did it differently from the way such things had always been done. They announced it publicly before the palace had been given time to prepare a response. They launched their own website. They suggested they intended to become financially independent. The palace was, by multiple accounts, furious. Not primarily at the substance, the leaving was in some versions of events already being discussed internally, but at the manner, at the unilateralism, at the violation of the fundamental institutional principle that the firm speaks with one voice, and that voice is managed from the center. They settled eventually in Montecito, California, in a house that cost $14.65 million, in a neighborhood of sufficient wealth and privacy that the photographers at the gate could be managed. Their son Archie, born May 6, 2019, adapted to the move. Their daughter Lilibet, born June 4, 2021 in California, has never lived in the United Kingdom. On the 7th of March 2021, CBS broadcast an interview between Harry, Meghan, and Oprah Winfrey that was watched by 49 million people in America alone. 11 million watched it in the UK. It was the most watched television event of the year. Meghan said that a member of the royal family, not the Queen, she clarified, not Prince Philip, had expressed concern before Archie's birth about how dark his skin might be. She did not name the person. Harry confirmed the conversation had taken place. The palace issued a statement saying the recollections of the family may vary. It did not deny the conversation. Meghan said she had experienced suicidal ideation during her time as a working royal, and had sought help from the institution and been told there was nothing they could do because it would not be good for the institution. She said she had not been given the same institutional protections as other members of the family. She said she had not known what she was walking into. That she had done no research, had not understood, and that if she had known she would not have been able to join the family in the way she had. Harry said he felt trapped before he met Meghan. He said the institution had failed him. He said he loved his father and his brother, but that the relationships were damaged. The interview was watched by 49 million people. It was discussed for weeks. It is still being discussed. The palace did not provide a detailed response. It issued through the official channels a statement of 61 words. The brothers, a rupture in the open. William Arthur Philip Louis, the Prince of Wales, is 4 years older than his brother. They grew up together in the particular pressure of royal childhood. The lessons in how to waive the practice runs for public appearances. The moment at the age of 9 and 7, respectively, when they understood that their mother's face was everywhere, and that the world had opinions about her that the world was not shy about sharing. They buried their mother together, walking behind her coffin through the streets of London on the 6th of September 1997. William was 15, Harry was 12. The images of those two boys, in dark suits, following a casket through crowds of hundreds of thousands of weeping people, are among the most devastating photographs of the late 20th century. Those who knew them in the years that followed describe a relationship of genuine closeness and genuine friction, the particular combination that characterizes siblings who have survived something terrible together and do not always agree about how to have survived it. William processed his grief by moving forward, by building a life that worked within the structure he had inherited, by marrying Catherine Middleton in 2011, and beginning the task of becoming the king he would be required to be. Harry processed his grief differently, or more precisely, for many years he did not process it at all, burying it in the way he had buried it at 12, until it surfaced in his late 20s with the force of things too long suppressed. The arrival of Meghan Markle in Harry's life coincided with the period of Harry's most active psychological excavation. He was in therapy. He was, by his own account, finally beginning to understand the weight he had been carrying. And he met a woman who encouraged this excavation, who was interested in his inner life, who asked him to examine the institution he had been born into with the critical eye of someone who had not been born into it. The royal family has not publicly described what happened between Harry and William. That is consistent with institutional behavior. What Harry has described in the opera interview, in subsequent interviews, and in his memoir Spare, published in January 2023, is a physical altercation with his brother in 2019. A confrontation in which William grabbed him by the collar and knocked him to the floor. He described the conversation that preceded it as his brother calling Meghan difficult, rude, and abrasive. He described his own response. He described the immediate aftermath. William did not respond publicly to the specific allegations. The palace issued statements through official channels that declined to engage with specifics. Two brothers who walked behind their mother's coffin at 15 and 12 now communicate, by Harry's account, almost exclusively through intermediaries and lawyers. This is what the rupture looks like from the inside. From the outside, it looks like headlines. From the inside, if you believe what Harry has said in extensive public testimony, it looks like grief, the original grief from 1997, unresolved and metastasizing through everything it touches. Spare, January 2023, the memoir that Harry published on the 10th of January 2023 sold 1.4 million copies in the United Kingdom and United States on its first day. It broke records. It was the fastest-selling non-fiction memoir in publishing history. It is an extraordinary document. Not because of the revelations it contains, though it contains significant ones, but because of what it reveals about the man who wrote it. Harry writes with a rawness and a specificity that is genuinely unusual for someone born into an institution that has spent centuries polishing every public expression to a fine, controlled surface. He writes about his mother's death with a grief that reads as undefended. He writes about his drug use in his 20s with a directness that surprised even people who had followed his story closely. He writes about his mental health, his therapy, his marriage, his children, his relationship with his father and his brother, with the willingness to be seen that is either admirable courage or reckless oversharing, depending on the reader's priors. He writes about Meghan in the way a man writes about a person who saved his life. There is gratitude in it. There is also, in some passages, a quality of dependence of a man who found, in one relationship, the emotional resources that his entire institutional upbringing had failed to provide, and who structured his existence entirely around protecting it. This is not a criticism. It is an observation about what happens when healing arrives late and concentrates entirely in one place. The book does not present a monster on either side. Charles is portrayed as a man who loves his sons and consistently, across decades, chose the institution over them. William is portrayed as a man defined by the institution and therefore, in some fundamental way, captured by it. The unnamed family members who expressed concern about Archie's skin color are not named. The institution is portrayed as something that has broken people before and broke Harry too, and that he has chosen to survive by leaving. What the book does not answer, what neither Harry nor Meghan has ever fully answered, is the question of what they wanted from the institution instead of leaving, what the scenario would have looked like in which they stayed. Whether there was a version of events in which the institution changed enough to accommodate them, or they changed enough to accommodate the institution, or some negotiated middle ground emerged, whether that was ever possible. People who work in and around the palace, speaking off the record, tend to say the same thing, that the collision was, in retrospect, inevitable, that an institution built on suppression met a person constitutionally unsuited to suppression, and that the only possible outcome was rupture. They disagree about who is responsible for the rupture. They tend to agree that the rupture was real and that its costs have been real. The children in the middle Archie Harrison Mountbatten Windsor was born on the 6th of May, 2019 at the Portland Hospital in London. He is the first mixed-race child born within the direct lineage of the British royal family. His grandmother on his mother's side, Doria Ragland, was present at the birth. His great-grandmother, the late Queen Elizabeth II, met him when he was 2 days old. Lilibet Diana Mountbatten Windsor was born on the 4th of June, 2021, in Santa Barbara, California. She has met the members of the British royal family fewer times than can be counted on one hand. She is named for her great-grandmother Elizabeth, whom the family called Lilibet, and for Diana, the grandmother she will never know. These two children are growing up in Montecito, California, in a house with a pool and a chicken coop, and by their parents' accounts, a childhood of deliberate normality, local schools, local friends, a life not structured around palace schedules and public engagements and the careful management of image. They are being raised, Harry and Meghan have said, as privately as two people of their parents' profile can manage. They have cousins in England, Prince George, Princess Charlotte, Prince Louis, who are being raised in the full weight of succession, who attend official engagements and formal portraits, and will grow up inside the institution that their uncle chose to leave. Whether Archie and Lilibet will one day have a relationship with those cousins is unknown. Whether they will ever see the country their father came from with any regularity is unknown. Whether, when they are old enough to understand the full complexity of what happened before they were born, they will feel gratitude or grief or something too complicated for either word, that is also unknown. What is known is that they are small children caught in a space between two worlds, neither fully British nor fully American in the way that the institutions of both countries will eventually require them to be, neither fully royal nor fully civilian. Their parents have tried to build them a third option, a life that belongs to no institution, that is simply theirs. Whether that third option will hold as they grow older is the question their parents cannot answer for them. This is the cost that is easiest to see and hardest to account for. The headlines have moved on. The Netflix documentary has been made and watched and debated. The memoir has been read. The Oprah interview has been analyzed. The institutional damage is being managed in the way that the institution manages everything, slowly, carefully, with the long view of an organization that has survived far worse. But the two children are still small, and they are still in the middle, the dollar figures and the distance. The economics of the departure are worth examining, because they tell a story that the emotional narrative sometimes obscures. When Harry and Meghan announced they were stepping back from senior royal duties and intended to become financially independent, the question was immediate: independent on what? Their royal salaries had come through the Duchy of Cornwall through Charles. Harry had his inheritance from Diana, estimated at approximately £7 million. Meghan's pre-royal earnings had been comfortable but not extraordinary. They were wealthy by most standards. They were not wealthy by the standards of the world they were leaving. What followed was the construction of a different kind of empire. A Netflix deal announced in September 2020 worth a reported $100 million for documentary and narrative content. A Spotify podcast deal worth a reported $25 million, which was eventually terminated by mutual agreement in 2023 after Meghan's podcast Archetypes produced one season. A speaking circuit, a production company, a website, a memoir that generated significant advance payments and even more significant sales. A brand, Sussex, that is being built with the deliberate architecture of a media business. The Oprah interview was watched by 49 million people. The Netflix documentary Harry and Meghan, released in December 2022, was watched by 28 million households in its first week, the biggest documentary debut in Netflix history. Spare sold 1.4 million copies on day one. The institution they left generates its wealth through 7 centuries of accumulated property, patronage, and constitutional arrangement. They are generating theirs through the story of having left it. The institution is the product. There is something in this that the palace has pointed to, sometimes explicitly, sometimes through surrogates, as evidence of bad faith, that the departure was not a withdrawal from scrutiny but a repositioning toward a different and more profitable kind of attention. That the privacy they cited as a reason for leaving is not the privacy they have actually sought. Harry and Meghan would say, and have said, that the alternative was financial dependency on an institution that had, they believe, failed them. That the choice was not between privacy and publicity but between an institution that controlled them and a market that they could control. That the story was already being told about them. They chose to tell it themselves. Both arguments contain truth. The tension between them is not resolved and is unlikely to be. What the institution costs it is worth pausing, in a story that has generated so much heat, to consider the cold fact at its centre. The British monarchy has survived Henry VII and the dissolution of the Church. The execution of Charles I, the abdication of Edward VII, 2 world wars, the systematic dismantling of the empire, the death of Princess Diana, and the ongoing and accelerating question of whether hereditary monarchy is a concept that belongs in the 21st century. It has done this by doing what institutions built for survival always do. It has absorbed, deflected, managed, and waited out. It will wait this out too. Charles III is on the throne. William is the Prince of Wales. The succession is clear. The machine continues. But the machine has never been cheap. The price paid by the people inside it, by Margaret, by Diana, by Andrew in ways that are far darker than anything in this story, by Charles himself across 4 decades of public difficulty, is a price paid in human beings. In the suppression of human beings. In the requirement that human beings subordinate everything personal and private and genuine to the requirements of an institution that does not love them back. That cannot. Institutions are not capable of love. Diana said this. In her own interview, the Panorama interview of 1995, which is to the 20th century what the opera interview is to the 21st, she said, "I don't think any of us know where we are heading. But I know there are people out there who will work tirelessly to ensure that the monarchy continues." She was right. There are, and the monarchy has continued. The question is what it costs to continue it and who is paying. Meghan Markle arrived at the palace as a self-made American woman who had built her life on her own terms and expected, or hoped, to continue building it. She found an institution that had a different understanding of what her meant. The palace's position, that membership in the institution required the subordination of the self. Meghan's position, that the subordination being required of her was different in kind and degree from what was required of others, and that the difference tracked along racial lines. Neither position has been refuted. Both are still held. The distance between them is the distance between Montecito and Windsor, which is 5,400 miles and also something much larger than geography. What remains on the 8th of September, 2022, Queen Elizabeth II died at Balmoral Castle at the age of 96. She had reigned for 70 years, 214 days, the longest reign in British history. Harry flew from California. He arrived at Balmoral too late to see her alive. He was not initially included in the official notification process, informed by news reports rather than by the palace directly, according to his own account. He stood with his father and his brother at the vigil. He appeared at official events in the days that followed. The photographs of him and William standing side by side at the lying-in state are, in retrospect, among the last images of them appearing in genuinely shared space. Meghan did not attend Balmoral. She waited in Edinburgh. She joined Harry for the public engagements. She did not appear to be unwelcome. The Queen had, by all accounts that have been made public, maintained a genuine warmth toward Meghan that other members of the family did not always share. She had given Harry and Meghan a cottage on the Windsor estate, Frogmore Cottage, which was later quietly reclaimed. The King's coronation on the 6th of May, 2023 fell on Archie's 4th birthday. Harry attended. Meghan did not. He sat in the 3rd row. He did not hold a role in the ceremony. He flew home the same day. The family, in the full human sense of the word, not the institutional one, is fractured. Whether it is irreparably fractured is something that only time, which moves differently for institutions than it does for people, will answer. Harry has said the door to reconciliation is open on his side. The palace has not commented on whether the door is open on its side. The palace does not comment on things like this. What is certain is that 2 small children are growing up in California, and they bear the names of royalty, and they will one day have to decide what those names mean to them. What relationship they want with an institution that made them possible and that their parents left. Whether the rupture is permanent or the beginning of something else. They are 4 and 2 years old. They are growing up with a chicken coop, and a mother who wanted them very much and a father who carried his grief for 30 years before he put some of it down. Whether that is a tragedy or a liberation or both, depending entirely, as this entire story depends entirely on who is doing the telling, the dark truth. Here is what is true, when you set aside the sides and the allegiances, and the enormous commercial machinery that has grown up around both Harry and Meghan's story, and the palace's response to it. A woman married into an institution that was not built for her, and did not know how to accommodate her. An institution met a person it was not built to accommodate and responded the way institutions respond, by protecting itself. A man who had been failed by that institution in the most devastating possible way, who had buried his mother at 12, because a system of attention and suppression and managed distance had failed to protect her, fell in love with a woman who saw the failure clearly and found, in that clarity, a reason to leave. Two brothers who had walked behind their mother's coffin are now separated by 5,400 miles, and the weight of everything that has been said and is not being said. Two children are growing up between worlds, carrying names that are heavier than any 4-year-old can understand. The institution endures, it always endures, that is what it was built for, that is what it is very good at. The people inside it, the particular, irreplaceable, unrepeatable human beings inside it, are a different matter. Diana knew this, she said so. She is buried at Althorpe, on an island in a lake that her brother designed, and the red roses planted around the edge of that island are tended by the Spencer family estate. Not by the palace, not by the institution, by the people who loved her. Harry sends Archie and Lilibet to local schools in Montecito. He coaches youth soccer. He has said, in interviews that carry the specific quality of a man surprised by his own contentment, that he is happy, that the life they have built is real and warm and theirs. Meghan has said the same. Her podcast ended, her television projects are continuing. She has returned to the public sphere after a period of deliberate withdrawal, with a new lifestyle brand and a presence that is calibrated, intentional, controlled in the way that everything about her now is controlled because she is controlling it. No one else is. Whether this is the end of the story or the middle of it is not yet known. The dark truth about Meghan Markle and the Windsors is that there is no dark truth. There is only what happens when a human being and an institution are incompatible, and neither can afford to say so clearly, and both pay the price. And the children grow. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe so you never miss out on more fascinating stories.